When you're staying at an Airbnb, it might have crossed your mind. Could my place be an Airbnb? And if it could, what could it earn? You could be sitting on an Airbnb and not even know it. Like maybe you have a spare bedroom where friends or family crash every once in a while. But when it's sitting empty, you could Airbnb it to help pay for some bills or, I don't know, something more fun. Either way, your home might be worth more than you think. Find out how much at airbnb.com/host.
WQEE 99.1 FM The Key, home of Southern sports and talk. Noonan, Sharpsburg, Franklin.
You're listening to At Home with Allison, your local expert on real estate, business, and community.
And we are back. It is the At Home with Allison show on WQEE 99.1 FM. I am your host, Allison Waters Realtor. You can find me anywhere on social media with the handle at A Waters Realtor. I really hope you guys, continue to tune in with the show as we continue to grow. So we're going to jump more into the bulk of the real estate aspect of this show. I have someone very special here with me today. It's actually my boyfriend, Justin Straight. Justin is a really inspiring person to me. He works very, very hard, pushes himself to the limit more so than really any other person I've ever met. So I think he's the perfect person to have on because he also has never bought a home. And it's funny because he's in the health insurance business. I'm in the real estate business. We both briefly know, about each other's job, but we don't really know how things work. And I want to go ahead and address first, that we live together, we are renters. And you are going to think in your head, Allison, you're a realtor. Why haven't you bought a house? Why are you renting? Well, fun fact for you, if you don't know, you have to be on a 1099 for 2 years before you're eligible to buy a house. I reached my 2 years right around the time our previous lease was ending, so we really didn't have time. So this is something that we're looking at doing this year. So we're going to talk about the process. A lot of you guys are going to have these same questions. You're going to, probably relate to a lot of the questions that Justin's going to ask. But before we get into it, welcome, Justin. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, Allison. To get started, what an awesome introduction. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's kind of out of this world to be brought in like that. I'm very humble. Thank you for making me sound like a superstar.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, so I work really hard, and I'm happy to be where I'm at.
Yeah.
And it's awesome to be in a position where I'm able to learn and grow every day. I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, is learning and growing. So from the insurance industry, I'm able to learn things every day. And knowing that you're in real estate and you're excelling and you're doing all types of things from coaching to closing deals, it's very neat to get the opportunity to learn more about what you do. The same way, if I can inspire you and motivate you and tell you about what I do, it's a beautiful process. So it's very exciting to be here, and I'm happy to learn,
Good.
And I'm excited as well.
Awesome. So, all right, go ahead. This is like the Q&A. Ask me whatever you want, whatever you think. We're just going to throw it all out there, and I'm just going to respond as if you're a client, and this is what we do. So
Sure. I would say from the beginning, the origin, I haven't bought my first home yet.
Right.
But that is coming up soon. So from a new buyer perspective, the first thing I want to know is, where would I get started in this process?
Yeah. So the first thing that you really want to look at, buying a home involves what? Money, So you need to understand where you're at financially, okay? And I know you know your numbers. You know where you're at. I swear Justin breaks down numbers like a freaking rocket scientist. So I know you know that. But what we have to do here, regardless of whether you do or don't know your numbers, you need to get with a lender, financial advisor that can help you take those numbers and make them make sense for what you want to purchase, what your price range is going to look like. And that doesn't mean that just because you're pre-approved for, let's say, $350,000 doesn't mean that financially you'd want to max out that option of $350,000. You might want to stay in a $325,000 range to keep your payments where you want them to be, or to put a larger down payment on that house at a lower purchase price so that it affects your interest rates and your payment and makes things a little bit lower. So the first option in any case scenario, after finding a realtor, which, I would hope would be me, get with the lender that the realtor works with and that has rapport with. You don't want to go with a lender that's an online company. I'm not going to name names on this show and put anybody down, but if they are a particularly online lending company that's based on a website, or you deal with everything digitally, if it's like a call center number or something like that, if you're not getting a direct contact every time you call, and the agent that you're working with or other agents that are also really successful and doing a lot of business doesn't have rapport with these companies, if they're big banks, again, not giving any names, but you probably know the largest banking companies that you can think of, typically they don't, as well as the online companies, sometimes their turnaround times are not as quick. Their numbers up front are not as accurate as they are when you get to the closing table. The last thing that you want to do is get with a lender that's going to tell you, oh, your interest rate is going to be this low interest rate and you're only going to need this much down. And then when you get to the closing table and you're signing the paper, you're bringing $6,000 more to the table than you thought you were. Your interest rate is, 0.5% or a whole % higher than you thought. And you are truly just like, what the heck is going on? This is not what I expected. It's very, very, very common for that to happen. So reliability with your lender as well with your agent is truly going to be your make or break.
Okay. So having somebody that I actually can speak to the same person every time.
Yep.
So there's nothing left out when you get to the end where you may have some surprises.
Absolutely. And two, you want to be able to contact them on the weekends or after hours. If it's a big bank or if it's an online banking company, they have set hours, or, if you get a different person every time, it becomes very confusing when you need to speak with someone after hours or on the weekend. Because things happen in real estate where you're working. I mean, you see me working at 10 o'clock sometimes, answering phone calls and talking to lenders, at the midnight hour. And you need that accessibility in order for things to work as smoothly as possible and to get through the transaction in the most, most honorable way possible. You want the people that you're working with to honor their word and have an honorable presence and reliability, that you can reach out to them and every time that you call them or text them, they're getting back to you, and they're also getting back to you with accurate information.
Sure. Awesome. Now, I know that I kind of jumped into where to start, but for myself, being in rentals at the moment, so I have this kind of notion that renting works right now. So the place is nice,
right?
Rent is somewhat affordable, but I'm not building any equity where I'm renting.
Sure.
Now, when I look into purchasing a home and I look at that large price, it's kind of overwhelming in a sense, whereas rent is you just pay by the month and you pay by the year.
Right.
Moving down the road, the difference between renting and buying, why would somebody actually decide to go over that hill and buy instead of continuing to rent one-year leases or something of that manner?
So there's a lot there. The number one thing is that when you're renting, you're paying 100% interest. So everything that you're pouring out is going directly to someone else. And while that may work temporarily, the problem is that one, typically your rent payments are going to be just as much, if not more, as they would be if you were owning a home of a similar value. So when you're renting, not only are you paying 100% interest, of course, but you don't have the option to really save because you're pouring a higher amount into your rental. Now, if you're owning a home, obviously, you're still going to have a payment. You're still going to have maintenance costs. You're still going to have utilities. You're going to have all of those things. But you're building equity in yourself and in your asset column. We talk about asset column a lot. So essentially, if you purchase a home and you're paying, a similar payment as you were renting, 3-5 years down the line, you have an asset that has built equity, that has money that either A, you could take out, take that equity out and invest it in remodeling your home or putting it into investment accounts or even selling the property, retaining that equity and using it to get an even better home or upgrading or something like that. And I think a big problem with where we're at right now in society in general, especially our age and the younger generations, is that we've been structured in a debt-based society where we're all breaking even. The national average per people's income is about $45,000-$50,000. That on average is about a $275,000 to $300,000 home, which is the most saturated price range. It's also a very competitive price range that, it before, especially in 2020, 2021, if you were using an FHA offer where you're only putting at 3.5% down, or you were using a 0% down loan like a USDA or a VA, you weren't desirable. You needed to have money saved like 5, 10, 20% down or be a cash offer in order to even really truly have a chance at getting the house without like selling your soul, essentially, offering ridiculous amounts over, saying you'll waive inspections, you'll waive contingencies, things like that. But now, the market that we're at now, there's actually a lot of opportunity for 0% down, 3.5% down FHA and USDA VA buyers because things aren't nearly as competitive. And even when they are, most people, or a lot of people, so 37% roughly of home buyers each year are first-time home buyers. So right now, they are a bulk of the offers that are actually going out into the market in general. So they've become more accepted, so per se. So I would say that when it goes back to the renting, before it would have been hard, if you didn't have the funds to save because you're just pouring into this break even every month cycle. Now it's easier to get out of renting and get into buying than it was over the last 2 years. Not only that, if you continue to rent, you're just kind of like stuck. I mean, truly, you know what I mean? You're stuck. You're in I have to be in this lease for the remainder of this year or for another year or another 2 years or whatever. When you own a home or buy a home, people always want to buy and sell. If you need to move or you need to make a change, you're actually going to make money off of that rather than lose money by having to pay out of a rent of a lease or something like that. So truly, it really comes down to, are you ready to buy? What does your life look like? I would suggest at any point in your life, truly, buying a home is putting something into that asset column, and it's building investments, which is something that there's a lot of lack of training and knowledge and information on that for our generation. So there's a lot to unpack. It really goes base by base or case by case, but it's kind of what I would always suggest for somebody.
Sure, yeah. I mean, honestly, another part that I see with the rental deal, and I mean, what you said was awesome. The 100% interest with the rental is that's a dream killer right there, because that's probably, with most folks, there's no telling, maybe from 20 to 30% of their yearly income that they're putting into something that they're not building equity in.
Right.
So thinking about that in terms of 5 years or so, that could be an insane disadvantage financially, as far as that goes. Now, another thing I see with the rentals that's kind of what I've learned is you can't really do much with them.
Right.
Like, you kind of just have to deal with whatever space it is that you're renting, and
you can't customize it, make it your own, invest in it. There's no...
So, yeah, that looks very, very intriguing, the buying side, especially building equity and just having the freedom to do what you want with it.
Yeah.
So getting into that, understanding that buying is a way of building financial stability and whatnot, and knowing where to start is a big thing. Having the money to start, finding a lender. Beyond that, you know that you have the money, you know you're qualified. Beyond that point of entry, where do you go from there? I know I have the money, I know I'm qualified, but I don't know how to see properties. I don't really know how to get the opportunity to get where I need to go, because the final point is, well, having a home.
Sure.
Okay, I have the money.
You got the pre-approval from a lender. Mm-hmm. You're good to go. So at that point, you start looking for houses. And for me, the first thing that I do for you whenever we get pre-approved is we're going to get you set up on a search with our Georgia listing service that's more up to date than Zillow, Realtor.com, any of those things. And it's going to automatically keep you and me updated collaboratively of what's coming on the market, what's fallen off of the market. And through this program that's through Georgia MLS, you get to favorite homes that you like, request information about homes that you like, and reject homes that you're not interested in. And honestly, seeing the photos, reading about it is great, but when you come to me and you're like, hey, can you find out more about this property, or I'm interested in this property, I'm going to reach out to that realtor and I'm going to find out a little bit more about the house, a little bit more about what the sellers are desiring, kind of what if there's any offers or what the competitiveness is of it. We'll also look at days on market and see if there's any documents like a seller's disclosure or something that'll like tell you how old the roof is, or how old the HVAC is, or how old the water heater is, or if there's been any foundation issues, or some of those things we can find out up front. But truly, until we actually physically go see the property, those photos might look a lot better than that house does in person, or vice versa. There has been times where the photos actually didn't do the house justice. So it just depends. But basically starting looking for those houses, getting into those homes, and then finding out as much about them as we possibly can pre-going under contract.
Awesome. So now we have a realtor. We're looking at homes.
Yeah.
We see some homes that look like plausible candidates.
Yes.
Now, beyond them being plausible candidates, theoretically, we'd want them to be perfect.
Sure.
But the reality of it is, most homes are never perfect. So how do we qualify a home to be a plausible candidate or the best potential candidate for the journey ahead as a home buyer or a home owner for a specific term or period of time?
Sure. So it really truly, the expectation up front is that if you're purchasing a resale house, meaning someone's already lived in it, especially if it's more than a couple years old, there's going to be things that are going to be wrong with the house, right? They could be very small things. I'm talking about a tiny little leak on the kitchen sink that doesn't mean anything. And then there could be bigger issues, right? So I think the expectation up front is, look, like you said, this house is not going to be perfect. What we're looking for is major defects and things that are going to be very, very costly, or could be very costly in the near future, or it really affects the livability or the safety of the home. So we can be as nitpicky as we want to, right? But the steps at this point is, if you like the house, you wanna go a little further, do a little bit of more, dig deeper. You get under contract, you write an offer, you get under contract, you get into what's called the due diligence. The due diligence period is like the first 5, 7, 10 days, whatever's negotiated in the contract, that you have as the buyer to hire your own personal private inspector to go into the home and inspect all the major and minor functions of that property. They're going to look at all the big stuff and all the little stuff and give you a really detailed report of, this is the big things that are wrong, these are the little things that are wrong, these are the things that absolutely need to be addressed, these are the things that could be addressed if you wanted to, and these are the things that may need to be addressed in the future, big and small. So getting that really detailed report from, again, a reliable inspector, that someone or a realtor that you're working with has lots of reliable experience with, is going to be your best bet. So once you get that, you can look at this report and have your realtor, bounce back and forth ideas with you on how to negotiate or approach it. So like I said, you can be as nitpicky as you want to, as far as you want every single tiny little thing in that house perfect and addressed before you move in. The reality is that that's probably not going to happen. You can go as detailed as you want, but you also got to think you're in a negotiation. You don't want to piss the other side off, so per se, where they're like, you know what, never mind, we're not doing anything for you because you're not willing to work with us. So you want to address the big things and throw in some of those smaller things and see what they're willing to do for you, and have your realtor negotiate. I'm going to negotiate as much as possible on your behalf. Now, there's lots of different ways that can work too. They may say, hey, I'll have someone fix this for you. Or they may say, B, I'm going to give you X amount of money towards your closing cost, and then you can handle it. Which in a lot of ways, I prefer that for the buyer, because it's more cash that they get to keep in their pocket. That's money that they're not putting out at closing, so they get to keep cash in their pocket. Or we may do both. We may say, hey, you fix these big things and then give us money for the small things towards our closing cost, and we'll be even. But, those repairs will be required to be done prior to closing. So you'll always have the option of knowing that when you go into the house, the things that you requested are completed, because we will require that. So there's a lot of ways that can be worked out, but just having the expectation that you're not going to buy a perfect home is essential. That way, you're not disappointed in any way, but at the same time, our job is to get you as good of a house as possible and make that home as livable and as functional and as close to perfect as possible for you realistically.
Okay. Yeah, so the ceiling isn't falling in, the floors are good, the water works, the AC is going to last for another couple years.
Right.
At least it looks that way. So the property is qualified.
Sure.
Now, what we're looking at doing next, I love the place. My inspector said, this is a gem. Like, this is a good property. Mm-hmm. The listing price is X amount.
Yes.
I don't know what to think about this. What do we do from that point forward? Because we've established this is actually a really nice place. Mm-hmm. But I've never purchased a home before, and I'm not sure if this even makes sense to pay this amount of money for this property.
Right.
Where do I go from there? How do I establish if it's actually worth the investment?
So you have what's called financial and appraisal contingencies in the contract. So we come up with a price up front after negotiations, whether it's reducing the purchase price, getting the closing costs, whatever we arranged based on that due diligence period. And the next step after going through that inspection process is to actually have the appraisal on the home. And you have protection based on what I'll write in the contract for you. You'll have protection for that appraisal process to see what the home is actually going to appraise for, and you're already going to know your financials up front. You're already going to know what to expect as far as if the house appraises for this value, how much money am I putting into it? Is it actually worth it? Well, we're going to find out with that appraisal. So when the appraisal happens, if it comes in low, and you're like, okay, it came in $10,000 less than purchase price, so we were going to be overpaying for this property. The seller is either going to have to reduce that property by $10,000 to get to where the appraised value was, or B, they're going to come to you and say, hey, well, we want X amount for the property, period, so you're going to have to come up with that difference in cash. And then you, as the buyer, is going to say, sorry, I don't have $10,000 to do this, or it's not worth me putting $10,000 in to do this. And whether it's worth it to you, honestly, is truly subjective. You may think that this house is in the perfect location. It is the home for you. It's everything you've ever dreamed, and you're willing to do that $10,000 over. The last 2 years, there were clients of mine that didn't care. They'd pay $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 over asking price. Why? Because it's going to be their forever home. It's different if it's a home for you that you're going into and you're like, I'm going to turn this around in 2 to 3 years. You pay $10,000 over appraisal value, and then in 2 years, it's gone up $10,000 in value, but you paid that $10,000 on top to where you may break even if you decided to sell it. So I think it really truly depends on where you're at in your life, what that home truly is to you, what it means to you, and like all the pros and cons of what you were looking for versus what the home actually is, and then also what comes from the inspection and other things. There's a lot there, but obviously the loan is only going to cover the amount of the house. And a lot of the time, as the buyer, you're not going to want to go above and beyond for that or do what you need to do to make it work. Sometimes the seller will meet you in the middle too. You come up with a little bit and the seller will, work however they need to do that. But it really comes down to a lot. But ultimately, you have the protection that if it doesn't work out or if it doesn't appraise for where you're at, you can say, hey, we're going to pull out of this deal, and then you'll get your earnest money back, which is the 1% of the purchase price that you put up front that says, hey, I'm really serious about this house. I'm willing to put up this money as collateral through this process. You'll get it back at closing if we make it, and you'll get it back during this appraisal period if something falls through.
Okay, that's new news to me.
News.
Absolutely. And now, this process has taken some time, I imagine. I'm not sure how long this process would take, how quickly this could be done. Even if I was enthusiastic about it, this is a process that normally takes a couple weeks, I imagine, from seeing the home, knowing you want it, qualifying, and getting, that portion done, right? It takes a little bit of time.
It does. So that's another thing that depends on your lender. So typically before in the past, closings are between 21 and 30 days for most loans. And that's what a fast lender or a good, standard time frame for a lender to be able to close those types of loans. If it's a cash deal, you can close as soon as 8 days. But now that I've found, another lender that is able to close loans really quickly. So just for reference, a USDA loan, for me and my experience, my first 2 years of real estate and with majority of, USDA loans in the market period, it usually takes between 30 and 60 days to close a USDA loan. With the lender that I use, we just closed one in 21 days, which is actually very, very, very quick. I've also had, FHA loans are typically, 21 to 30 days, and I'm now able to close those close with my lender in as soon as 14 days. So it really depends in a lot of different ways. Conventional loans can close really quickly in 10 to 14 days as well. So there's a lot there that kind of is contingent on different things. But yeah, that's typically, I would say at least 2 weeks, but you're really looking for 2 weeks to a month, depending on what type of loan and other things like that.
Okay, awesome. And now, this is something that's completely foreign to me. It sounds like Chinese. You're talking about USDA loans and FHA loans. VA loans, I imagine, are
veterans.
For veterans. Okay. Now, how would I know what loan would be the most plausible for me, or what I was qualified for, or what would make the most sense financially for me in this process? Because we know it's going to take some time, so it looks like some of these may take a lot more time than I'd imagine I'd want the process to take. So maybe that would immediately disqualify one from the other.
It does.
But from there, there's still some options, it looks like. So how would I know what would be the best form of loan for purchasing a home?
So you'll have this determined up front. When you go for your first step with the lender's going to look at how much cash do you have, what do you want your payment to be, what's your credit score like. There's a lot of different things that play into what type of loan you're able to have. So USDA is a government, USDA, FHA, VA. USDA is 0% down and VA is 0% down. USDA has caps based on county for the max amount of income that you're allowed to have each year. So some counties, you can't use a USDA loan if you make over $100K a year, or if you make over $80K a year. You won't be eligible for the USDA loans because the government funds them, and they run out of money. They're like a government ran thing, but they run out of money yearly. So they have a set amount yearly that they're allowed to give to people, and so they typically set a cap on what that is. But USDA is also for rural properties. You have to live in the house has to be in a particular area outside of the city in order to qualify for USDA eligibility. So it has to be in a particular area, you have to make a certain amount of money, and your credit score matters.
So that one's kind of restrictive in a sense.
It is.
Yeah. It
is a little bit restrictive. And then FHA loans, you typically have to have at least a 580 to 600 credit score. And I think that changes. A lot of these things change yearly or randomly or whatever, but there should be in the general ballpark.
Good credit.
Yeah, FHA, you need to have at least decent to good credit. Yep. And that's a minimum of 3.5% down. So 3.5% is what your required down payment would be. And closing costs for any of these loans can range from 3 to 6%. So someone has to pay that. It can either be you or the seller or split or whatever. But conventional is 3% or more down with great credit. You need to have I don't even know, it's somewhere in the mid to high sixes. The higher the higher credit score that you have, the lower your interest rate's going to be. And conventional is always a really good option. But, FHA has really good interest rates as well. But you also have to pay what's called a PMI, or private mortgage insurance, on top of your monthly payment for FHA, USDA loans like that. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to the loans and all the nitty gritty details, your lender is the one to really go to for the financials and things like that. But they're going to look at your options, your money, your debt to income ratios, and they're going to give you, look, if you go USDA, this is what it looks like. If you go FHA, this is what it looks like. If you want to go conventional, this is what it looks like. And it really depends on all of those things on which one is the best for you. And then VA, you have to be a veteran. And there's a max that you are allowed for veterans that are allowed to use for purchase price loans on their home. And it just kind of depends.
Okay. Well, that is very neat. And the conventional, let me see, the down on the conventional, what was that similar to the FHA as well, or was that a lower down?
It was a minimum of 3% for conventional. Yep.
Okay. Now, I understand that would be taken care of by a lender, not necessarily your realtor's job to do that, but as a first-time home buyer, it's nice to know just from a bird's eye view what I could expect there. Now, we've gotten to this process where we understand that we found the property, it's qualified, we know what type of loan we're using, we understand that this process is going to take a little bit of time, but now we want to put an offer in. Mm-hmm. Or we think we want to put an offer in. How does that process work as far as looking at a property, determining its worth? Mm-hmm. Now you're in what seems to be a competitive environment.
Okay.
How do I ensure that this property will be mine?
So we're going to look at a lot of things regarding that. One, it's going to depend on your financial capability. B, it's going to depend on what we're up against. And I don't mean that we know exactly what we're up against, because truly, realtors are not supposed to tell you what other offers look like, what type of offers they are, how much they are, and all that type of stuff. So the only thing that we can really go off of is how many offers are we competing against? What's the purchase price at versus what maybe comparables look like. So I could do like a report that shows like, look, this house could potentially appraise within these price ranges. Or B, we go back to one of the options we talked about before. It's like, look, I got $10,000 extra cash that I'm willing to put on top of whatever to get this house. So we'll look at different parts of the offer, like the purchase price, whether we're asking the sellers for closing costs or not. Obviously, if we're not asking them for closing cost, then we're going to be more likely. We're going to be more competitive there. We'll also look at those due diligence days that I was telling you about, those days that we can have inspections and pull out of the deal for any reason. I mean, even if you wake up and you say, oh, I had a dream last night that this house was a disaster and it was going to ruin my life, so I don't want to buy it anymore. You can do that during that period. So the shorter that period is to the seller, the more appealing your offer looks. We can also, if the house, and I don't ever suggest this unless the house is a lot newer and it is in great condition just based on what we can see, and we already have a disclosure from the seller that tells us about all of those major functions, you can say that you're willing to take the house as is. Now, that does not mean that you're not going to have an inspection done and that you're not going to do a thorough investigation to find out if the home is good or not. You're just saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm not going to ask you to fix anything petty on this house. We're not going to ask you to pay any money to fix anything. We're good. We'll do our inspection. We'll look to see if there's anything crazy or major that we need to worry about. But the house is newer. It looks beautiful. It's in great condition. We're good with it. So there's also a plethora of other things that you can do to make it competitive, but we'll look at your financial ability, B, what the market is saying, because ultimately the market and the buyers determine the value of the home, ultimately. So we'll look at those things, and then we'll try and make the offer as competitive as possible that still protects you and gives you the best opportunity to get the house.
Okay. The market and the buyer determine the value of the home.
Yes.
That's interesting.
It is, because most people would think, oh, well, you can't tell me the value of my home. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I could put your home on the market. In 2020, 2021, I could put your home on the market for $300,000, but somebody's going to swoop in and pay $350,000 for it, because it's a competitive house and everyone wants it. Or B, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we're in a slower time period right now. I can list your house for $300,000, but if it sits and we don't have people coming to view it, or it's just not a desirable time, people, or this house isn't in, excellent shape, we may end up selling this for $275 because that's what the buyers are going to bring to the table, and they're going to negotiate it that way. My job is to, if I'm representing the seller, of course, is to put you in the best position possible to make as much money as possible. But I do not determine the value of the home. The market and the buyers determine the value of your home, and my job is to best advise you on where to place that so that you get the most for it.
Okay. Neat. I really like that. And now, taking the home as is would probably be pretty scary in most situations, unless, like you said, it's a brand new home. Now, from where I'm sitting, it sounds like everything's going to plan. This home is pretty much on its way to being mine.
Right.
Now, I'm going to throw a wrench in here just because I really want to understand how this process works. So say that, you're in the due diligence period. You may have even won the home, but you discover an issue with the home that was just overseen. How is that actually factored into moving forward?
Do you find this issue before we close or after we close?
This would be, I would hope, before we closed.
So, if you went through the inspection process and it was not found, and you're past your due diligence period, which is your negotiation period, I can pull out of this for any reason, I can tell you, like, hey, if you want me to buy this house, you better fix this type thing. Now, that's why the inspection and due diligence process is so important. Now, if there was something that was already there, and your inspector missed it, and you try to pull out of the deal after that due diligence period, you are at potential of losing your earnest money. But if a pipe busts in the house before you buy it, or a tree falls on the house before you buy it, or a new problem comes about before you actually close on that house between the due diligence and the closing process, the seller's obligation is to maintain that house in the condition that it's currently in. So the seller would be reliable for resolving and fixing that issue before you actually closed on the house, or you would be able to get your money back because the seller essentially would be defaulting on their end of the loan, or their end of the contract.
Okay, great. Yeah, so that gives me some confidence in that process, simply because for me, I worked hard for my money, and I thought that this was a great idea, and then something happened, of course, leading me to believe, oh goodness, maybe this was a mistake. But the neat thing about what you just said is that the seller is actually responsible for maintaining this property until it actually is mine. So they're liable instead of me, which is beautiful.
Yep.
So things are resolved. You're moving forward. You're going to the close. Now, with that being said, everything is flowing the right direction. And you're sure that this is going to be a thing that's resolved within a couple days or a week or so, but this property is yours or mine, if you will. How does that look as far as closing on the home and what the seller is obligated to do there, or how do I move in? What does that look like as far as that resolution?
So once we get past the appraisal process and we know that, we've negotiated everything, we've got the house appraised at whatever it was at, and we've worked everything out and we're good to go. At this point, this is when you'll go ahead, and plan your movers and get your utilities set up for that day, and go ahead and pre-plan that this is going to happen and this is going to be on this date. So when you have that date and everybody agrees on a time on when you're going to close, Typically, within 3 days before closing, you're going to receive what's called your closing disclosure, and it's going to break down all your final numbers, exactly the amount of money that you need to wire for your closing, exactly how much your payment is going to be each month, or at least roughly, because your payment actually includes taxes, and your taxes can go up and down each year. So it will be not a fixed payment every month, but it will be estimated. And you'll I really have a true understanding of what to expect financially, and then when the property is actually going to become yours. And then in that meantime, the day before closing, or typically the day of, you'll have what's called a final walkthrough. Well, you'll get to go to the house again. And you'll be able to walk through, make sure that no new things have been done, or that there wasn't anything that the seller covered up that you were unaware of, and kind of make sure, that the house is in the condition that it needs to be for you to continue forward. And then when you get there that day, all you need is your license, and then you just sign the documents. The attorney goes over every document with you. You're free to ask as many questions as you want, just to make 100% sure that everything is understood by you and everything like that. And then once you get the signatures, the keys are yours and everything's done, and you can move in at that moment. Yep.
Interesting. Okay, so that is a beautiful, beautiful explanation of how this works in a very bird's eye view.
Yeah.
It gives me a better understanding of how it actually works. Now, the only place that I see where there could be a potential contingency or discrepancy is maybe that final walkthrough where is it common for someone to get cold feet or, say this isn't for me, or is that actually... I wouldn't say non-existent, but...
It shouldn't be common.
Right.
Because your realtor and you should have had open dialogue through this entire process. A good realtor is going to make sure you're good, and is going to make sure they're asking you the right questions, and they're having you ask them the right questions. At this point, if you pull out the day before closing and it's just because you have cold feet, you're going to be losing your earnest money, whatever that is that you put up, and you're potentially putting the seller in a very, very bad situation, and the seller can sue you at that point for a plethora of things. So the expectation is that you should have a good idea of what to expect already. You should know at this point what condition this home is, what the value is, and what your financial situation is. And there should be a clear understanding from every aspect of the transaction at this point. So unless there was something that came up at that final walkthrough that threw everybody for a loop and was something that was not there before, there's really not a lot of leverage for you at that point to back out. We're weeks into this process at this point. You've been through all the processes of the transaction. The only time that I ever know at the closing table that someone was not wanting to move forward was because we had the seller and the buyer came along on the closing table day and said, I don't like the way that you paved the new driveway. And it's like, we did what you asked. We got the driveway done. So it was a gravel driveway. And when you pour gravel, it takes time to set in. You lay the gravel down, you put it there. Well, they didn't like how rough it was going up the driveway. And so they were wanting to back out. But legally, our seller fulfilled the obligation. And they had to have a professional come in and explain to them that the rocks and the gravel settle over rain, over time, over you driving on it. So that's the only situation I've ever ran in where the buyer was like, quote unquote, having cold feet. But truly, I think they were just using that as an excuse, and it ultimately worked out. So this should not be a common thing. If you have a reliable person that you're working with, realtor, lender, whatever, that you can express yourself to, that's why it's really important to work with someone that someone knows, or that you know or have had a connection with, or that someone has a good word about, because you're going to go through all the emotions with them. And you're going to need someone. We always joke because we're like therapists, truly. That's part of our job. So we're going to walk through everything with you, and you should already have a good understanding based on the conversations that you've had of what to expect.
Awesome. Well, I'll say this. This is a lot of good information, especially for a first-time home buyer like myself. I feel much more comfortable with the idea now. I would say my last concern or my last curiosity would be, okay, we have the home now. Is there actually a plan or a exit strategy or a growth strategy for buying a home and actually gaining financial stability from it and being able to get into another home without having a bunch of friction and stuff like that? I know those are two different things, but is there a home buying plan essentially, or are you just, you buy your home and you hold it for 20 years and then you may sell it, break even, whatever? Is there a way you can determine when's the best time to sell this home and get into another property? Is there a way to strategize?
There's a way to strategize your financials as far as the investment side of things with a financial advisor. As far as someone being able to tell you, you need to buy this house and you need to sell it again in 3 years, there's no way under the sun. I don't care if someone's been doing real estate for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, their whole entire life since they came out the womb. No one can tell you what the market is going to be like in 3 years. Now, you can create an estimated plan or, have a plan for when you're going to buy your next investment property, your secondary home or your third home, by creating that financial plan with your financial advisor, and then have that realtor connect you with that person and walk you through those processes. But as far as someone coming to you, if they say, hey, this is the exact plan, this is when you're going to buy, this is when you're going to sell it, this is how much money you're going to make,
right,
it's completely impossible. And if someone comes to you with that plan, you probably need to be a little worried. Not that there aren't structural plans that you can create, but you can't set a defined timeline or defined amount of money, because it's just, there's too many variables. The market is too inconsistent, and there's just too many things that can come up, even financially, for you to know 100% what to do or what to expect. But you can have ideas, and you can have your financial advisor kind of talk to you about how you need to be saving and spending the money, how to invest in the property. There are what's it called, like templates and Excel sheets and stuff like that we have as realtors that can help you break down like how much I want to put into this house versus how much I can net from it by investing in it, renovating it, renting it, whatever it is like that. But again, they're all estimates, and no one can tell you for 100% what the final numbers are going to be, or exactly what the process is going to look like and over what time period.
Sure. Well, from that, it sounds like being flexible is kind of the key to gaining the most out of the home buying and selling experience. There's no set guide for when is the best time to buy or to sell. Really, the market determines that, it sounds like. Now, this is beyond buying the home. I've bought the home, and I know that we're running short on time. I got this last question. If I thought that I wanted to sell my home, how would I go about that process? Now, this is on the opposite end. I've bought the home. It's gained considerable amount of value. I have equity now. I know that I'm profitable and that I have another property that's a candidate, but I understand the buying side, but I don't understand the selling side.
Right.
And I'm considering selling my home. Now, and I know this is going to be pressed for time, so I don't want to, make this super long and drawn out, but from a bird's eye view, if I thought my home was worth good value and I felt prepared to go through that process, although I don't know 100% what that process is at the moment.
Yeah.
I was prepared to sell my home because I knew financially there was something to gain.
What do we do?
What do we do there?
So, number one thing there is, again, it goes back to the realtor. You want to find out, one, whether the seller is going to want to buy another home or whether they're just selling it to get equity and maybe they're going to go move with some family or something like that. It really depends on what the plan is. First and foremost, you may need to talk to a lender again or a financial advisor to find out if you have to sell your home to buy a new one, because that means you're contingent on selling your home before you can buy another one. But in order to figure out kind of where you're at with equity and stuff like that, we do what's called a comparative market analysis. And this is where we get homes in the area typically within a certain mileage and within a certain price range that have same number of beds and baths, similar square footage, similar acreage, all that type of stuff. And then we put your upgrades into it as well and calculate those, calculate any additions to the home, maybe like a detached garage or a new fence or anything that you've added. And we kind of create a general price range that we think, based on current market data, that your home potentially could sell for. And then we give you that idea and you take those numbers and you work with your financial advisor or your lender or whoever, and you kind of figure out what your plan is for the financial side of things. And then the realtor or my side of things is preparing the home, whether that's staging, decluttering, getting photos, video made, giving a seller checklist of things that maybe they could do if they wanted to make the curb appeal look better, or maybe if they wanted to do a slight upgrade here that would bring a lot of value, and kind of lay all of that out for them. And then they'll have a good idea of what the strategy is, what that could potentially look like. And then we get a time frame and kind of go from there.
Sure. Well, that is awesome. Wow, that's a lot of information. The buying and the selling side, beautiful presentation, by the way. I appreciate you walking me through it.
Of course. We'll go through it together one day.
Sure, yeah. We're gonna give it a go, and I'm thankful that I have you in my corner. Mm-hmm. Now, with that being said, I think that essentially wraps it up for as far as like getting that overview. Yeah. For me at least, but if you have closing thoughts on this, I'd be happy to hear about the experience, or like getting in touch with you, how to actually get you in my corner to help me with this process. Because I'm sure a lot of people want to know how do we actually get going and when can we get started?
So, I'm super responsive. I always have my phone with me. I think the most important thing, and this is why this show is called At Home with Allison, and why, A&A Homes with Ashley and I, we're at home with Allie and Ash. Like, I feel like I want you to feel at home with me, and I really care. And I'm going to do my absolute best to walk you or whoever through the process. And I do have so many resources, and I just have a lot to provide people and a lot of value. And I want to be here. So obviously you can find me on social media anywhere. At A Waters Realtor is my tag. Allison Waters Realtor. You should be able to find that pretty much anywhere. Call me 678-634-9770, text or call me, reach out to me, whatever way, and we can just talk about options. Sometimes you never know if you are actually capable of buying a home. People will think, oh, well, I'm not ready yet, or I'm actually not capable, but then you get in touch with a lender and you're like, oh, I actually do have multiple options, or they can even help you prepare for, if you want to buy 6 months down the line and you need to get your credit up or you need to save X amount of money. There are financial plans that can help you get ready. So find a realtor. Whether you're looking to buy a home or not, have a realtor on speed dial that you can call while you're a homeowner. Like, hey, I need an HVAC person. I need a plumbing contact. I need whatever it is, a contractor connect. Have a realtor that can give you market updates and that just can be there, because if they're a good realtor and they really care, they are constantly going to provide you value, whether they're looking to buy or sell or not. So with that in mind, I appreciate you asking all these. You had really good questions. That was a really good conversation, and I bet a lot of people have the same questions, and I think we went into a lot of good detail. I'm sure you can imagine how long it actually takes to learn all that, and we didn't even cover, everything. But point of the matter is, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the questions, and this was a great segment. Guys, if you need anything, you can reach out to me. I am here, and I look forward to continuing to grow this show and continuing to grow business. There's so much good to come, and thanks again if you tuned in for this episode. Look forward to next week, and we're going to have Dave Gasser with Roofing Done Right and Eric Egglested from HomeScan Inspections on here, and we're going to talk about home inspections and what those look like. So look forward to seeing you guys next week. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you later. It's WQEE 99.1 FM.
Thank you for listening to At Home with Allison, your local expert on real estate, business, and community.
With CBD American Shaman, life can be happy. Life can be peaceful. Life can be connected. Life can be satisfying. Life can be successful. Life can be adventurous. Life can be balanced. CBD American Shaman. Life is better with a feather.
There really is no season like winter, and no time like now to linger longer and experience Biltmore at its most tranquil. Enjoy our lowest prices of the year and save up to 20% on select dates when you stay overnight. Winter at Biltmore is the time to relax, reflect, and feel transported to a world of grace, grandeur, and old-world charm. Plan your stay and save at Biltmore.com.